Greetings, humans! Today, we are answering the question of what happens when a human soldier trained from birth to follow orders is then betrayed by those issuing those very orders. This is a profound question that humans find themselves repeatedly grappling with, and is deserving of a multi-layered narrative exploration. However, will most humans sit still for such a nuanced examination? Probably not. Enter the 90s sci-fi film Soldier, coming out next week on a newly remastered 4K disc. Zbot4096 here, with a review of the 4K UHD disc release of Soldier. As usual, our review will mechanically process this human rectangular art form in 6 sections, namely the film's context, the engagement of its story, minus plot spoilers, the appeal of its characters, the resonance of its theme, the technical quality of the disc itself, and of course, our rendering of our rating of the film. Let us begin. If this film has been out of your sensor range, you are not alone. It was out of ours as well. It is, at first glance, a Kurt Russell science fiction film. But, unlike, say, Escape from New York, it's not directed by John Carpenter. It does not demonstrate its self-awareness with exaggerated campy scenarios and dialogue, and does not have the alibi of having been made in the 1970s. It actually came out in 1998 from Paul Anderson, a year after his fairly striking Event Horizon, and before his slide into Alien v Predator and the various Resident Evil films. Furthermore, we didn't see the film at the time. Now, as we access that 1998 folder, the film looked pretty generic and awful. We were annoyed at Event Horizon's missed opportunity to tell something original, and our content ingestion liquid state drive at the time was nearly full. Now, jump cut forward 28 years to today, our LSD has exponentially greater capacity, and Arrow Video has done a 4K HDR remaster of the film, releasing it on disc next week, on April 28th. Since we had that proverbial change of circulatory fluid pump about Event Horizon in that intervening period, as described in an earlier review, we were curious if this film had something to it after all. So we spun up our time displacement equipment and summoned a retail unit of the disc from next week to review it. The story fits into the overlap of the future dystopia genre and the muscular action beat-em-up genre. So essentially, the spiritual sibling to 1987's The Running Man and 2000's Pitch Black. However, this film plays it straight. There are no spandex costumes or hammy one-liners. In fact, Kurt Russell's Sergeant Todd has almost no lines at all. He often has no response when other characters engage with him, unless explicitly compelled to give an answer. Instead, the film relies on showing what he does, what he sees, and what happens to him. This is an oddly compelling way to present an action sci-fi movie, since it's also in turn oddly silent on conventional exposition. We have no context for the world they're in. There's not one iota of galactic politics presented, other than the titular soldier being part of an elite unit in a future US military. We never see why or even what they're supposed to be fighting. In this way, the film diverges from other military-themed science fiction films such as 1985's Enemy Mine or 1997's Starship Troopers, and delivers a streamlined, if not elegant, parable about duty. It is definitely a movie star, action vehicle, B-movie, typical of the 80s and 90s, and understanding this we can forgive the limited, low-budget production and its vintage effects. We were, in fact, tickled by the goofy, futuristic machine guns, which looked like the production crew had just taken some cheese graters, painted them matte black, and screwed them onto existing prop guns. Similarly, we forgive the film's prodigious use of sci-fi tropes. The film's central storyline contrasts a technological terror state with a bucolic agrarian community, which we have seen many times before. In this regard, the film does issue a disclaimer early on acknowledging its referential accessing of previous sci-fi films. Now, part of Sergeant Todd's service record, shown early in the film, lists tours of duty at Tannhauser Gate and the Shoulder of Orion, two battles that Roy Batty references in his deeply resonant Tears in Rain speech in Blade Runner. The film makes sure we caught that reference by actually inserting it into dialogue later in the film. And Todd's record doesn't end there. He served at the Nibian Moon, Antares Nebula, and Perdition's Flames, all far-flung locations that Khan operatically vows to chase Kirk through until his wrath is quenched in Star Trek II. Although, to be fair, we think Khan's mention of Perdition's Flames is a metaphorical reference to the Earth's mythological prison dimension called Hell, and not a specific physical location in the real galaxy. That being said, returning to Soldier, we acknowledge the acknowledgement and accept the overall, for that matter, because it does something we rarely see. This isn't a film about seeing others as valid beings, which, to be fair, is an important theme to highlight. This isn't even a film about a specific social allegory. This film is just about good guys, bad guys, incredible odds, and the promise of a huge payoff. And even with that, the film has some howlers in the plot that the audience can see coming parsecs away. For example, a very nice but inconvenient character is dispatched comfortably and on schedule before said inconvenience would have to be addressed. And nobody seems sad about it. But, as we said, we're giving the film a pass on all of it. Now, why would we do this? First, the characters are fun. Kurt Russell as Sergeant Todd is delightful. He says nothing, does questionable things, but this man can emote. We've seen the actor present emotional turmoil through a bushy beard and a giant parka in The Thing, and by Grabthar's hammer, he's doing it again, without the beard and parka. Plus, he's not doing this in a vacuum. We have Gary Busey and Jason Isaacs hamming things up as aggressively aggressive military honchos ping-ponging around him, as well as Jason Scott Lee and Connie Nielsen, giving him both a mirror and a vision to balance between. Speaking of which, Nielsen is positively magnetic. With almost as little to work with as Russell, she conveys far more through layered emotional performance, as we would see later in her career as Lucilla in 2000's Gladiator. The result is that with this ensemble around him, we believe Todd's unspoken thoughts and reasons. Every time Todd takes action, we understand why, without him telling us anything. It's actually somewhat refreshing to see a film rely so heavily on unspoken, unnarrated, visual performance to tell a story. We do admit that this sounds like we're giving the film the benefit of the doubt, which is a fair and, yes, accurate observation. We do owe an explanation for that, and it's this. The film aims to tell us that duty without compassion is undeserved. Loyalty must be earned. This is a very straightforward statement, and relevant galaxy-wide. and one that in 1998 was so plainly accepted so as to make the theme a moot point, especially for the US government and military at the time. However, in the intervening years, time has not been kind to the United States, with it engaging in protracted resource wars based on flimsy evidence, lowering the nation's validity as a model of fairness and justice. And now, we're at the point where that nation has twice elected a career criminal and national bully, who attempted a coup when he lost an intervening election, who sits at the center of the planet's most depraved criminal political scandal in its history, who then invaded 2 countries, 3 if you count cities within his own country, without a semblance of validity or even consistency in his proclamations. US military leaders planning top-secret operations, as well as other Earth leaders struggling to access the traditional goodwill and support of the US, are starting to ignore him, since he cannot be trusted with sensitive information, be consistent in any relationship, or agree on an external reality. With this extreme of privileged human behavior in full control of a zombie democratic system, the film Soldier is suddenly extremely realistic and laser relevant. The film, landing right now, poses the question to its audience, which includes members of America's elite military, to stop and consider the orders of its leaders, evaluate those giving the orders, and assess their validity. It then asks those same elite soldiers to observe their world and assess where they see their principles of loyalty and honor are better reflected in others, and then make their own choice to fight for what they actually believe in. And it's all done in the gleeful language of kicking hindquarters and blowing stuff up, yee-haw, which we choose to consider as the film doing so intentionally, as a way to hold the attention of the audience that most needs to consider this question. But wait, how do those insane beatings and explosions look and sound on the 4K HDR disc? Well, first, the visuals are extremely crisp and bright, so much so that they expose the strings and tape holding the film together. For example, we zoomed in on the low-budget mustache sticker one of the main characters was wearing. It was so distracting, our main processor missed much of his initial dialogue, as we were wondering why his mustache needed to be faked. Could the actor not grow a mustache? Similarly, Kurt Russell's stunt double has an extended solo performance, which is also distracting. Are we suddenly watching another person's fight? Also, the initial shot of a spaceship in space is so clear and vivid that we can see the ship model is waved by hand in front of the camera, while a wispy optical layer of clouds attempts to blur that ship's unmistakable signature wobble. Having not seen any other version of the film, we cannot tell if these details jumped off the screen before. However, they are not that distracting, and otherwise fit with the B-movie band of budget-constrained genre fiction. In fact, they are indications of the overall visual fidelity and wide color gamut of the presentation that make Russell's dreamy blue eyes sparkle, and Nielsen's lavish eyelashes bat that much more. As for how it sounds, well, the disc does not have a new Atmos mix. Instead, it features a DTS-HD MA 5.1 track. This turns out to be an acceptable substitute. The lossless track is effective at underscoring the story. The rumble of starships and the explosions of combat resonate well and occasionally dip into the infrasonic range of bass frequency response. And even without the subtlety of Atmos, the surround sphere was actually active in placing atmospheric and dimensional sound effects around the viewer. All in all, Arrow Video has done an exemplary job presenting this film with a level of fidelity that actively immerses the audience in the perspective of Sergeant Todd. We see and hear everything he does, and we experience his influences and emotional context alongside him. And it really just comes down to that. This is a film that takes the language of B-movies and delivers a simple but solid message on the validity of authority. The timing, however, of this pristine disc releasing to Earth's home video consumers in a time of chaos for the US military chain of command and consequently Earth's geopolitical balance, which compels us to give Arrow's 4K HDR disc release of Soldier our high rating. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your own comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zoggplex. You can expect more discussions of reviews of theatrical movies and 4K home video releases on a periodic basis as we continue to engage with your human rectangular entertainment. So, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you can, please comment so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. Until next time, farewell, humans.